Hello and welcome to the Digital Assets Report. I'm Jane King at the New York Stock Exchange, and with me today Matt Bastian, the Director of CUSIP Global Services, and also Vincent Molinari, CEO of Templum Markets. As always, welcome.
Hello, Jane.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Matt, just tell me a little bit about your background and what brought you here today.
Sure. So perhaps for your viewers, a little bit about what a CUSIP is first. A CUSIP is a 9-character identifier. It is the primary key for trading, clearing, and settling securities in the US and Canada. Of that structure, the first 6 positions uniquely identify the issuer. The 7th and 8th position are for a specific security from that issuer. And then the 9th character is a mathematical check digit. So that's what it is. The CUSIP business is run by the Market Intelligence Division of S&B Global, but the franchise itself is actually owned by the American Bankers Association. So with that external ownership structure, we have an industry-appointed board of trustees, and their insight and guidance really steers a lot of our growth activities, including new asset class expansion. So we're continually on the lookout for new pockets of the market that could benefit from the precision and reliability of what we do, or otherwise suffer for lack of a standard. So it's really that dynamic that brought us into the collaboration with Vince's firm and getting into digital securities and TAOs.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So Templum and CUSIP working together. So kind of explain how that benefits the end user.
Well, I think it's kind of simple, well overdue. I think when we look at Templum Markets and CUSIP collaboration, it's really about creating standardization. Right? When we look at the emergence of digital assets and securities, having the benefit of having a cornerstone like CUSIP, who's a hallmark of our traditional financial markets, moving over to create standardization so we can access information and data, have continuity for all investors, access through data terminals, you begin to elevate the profile and the access to these instruments by proven standardization. We think that's a great step in the evolution of these assets.
Okay. Now, so tell me a little bit more about CUSIP. So, this has been around for a long time. I mean, I worked on Wall Street for a while, but I hadn't heard of CUSIP.
Yes, so thank you for asking. We are actually celebrating being the standard for 50 years now.
50 years!
Happy anniversary!
Thank
you, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, celebrating our Golden Jubilee this year, so we've had some activities around that, but yeah, it's been a great road for us, and as I mentioned, really always looking to grow into new asset classes along the way, whether it's things like precious metals, the digital securities, syndicated loans, listed options. So we've really branched out over the years beyond our more traditional vanilla, corporate debt, equity, that sort of thing.
So what was it about digital assets that you thought, wow, here's an opportunity?
Sure. Well, for us, these are unregistered securities like any other. They're Reg D or some other SEC exemption, just in a digital format for executing on a DLT or a blockchain platform. But for us, as long as it has that valid offering document behind the security, which is really the mandatory starting point for us, so we can go through and pull out the data elements that are necessary to guarantee uniqueness. That's really the first criteria. So once we found out that there was a need for that common standard and really a way to perhaps bridge the digital securities with the more traditional markets, and as Vince was hinting, now you've got a common language for record harmonization, regulatory reporting, price discovery. So all the functions that a CUSIP serves in the more traditional markets, we're just trying to port that over into the digital securities.
So we've established that it's like a standardization of digital assets. Is it a seal of approval or just more?
Yeah, no, it's not a seal of authenticity or recommendation for any security. So we're very clear that that's not the purpose of a CUSIP. It's meant to facilitate trading, clearing, and settlement. And given some of the bad press, I think, around affiliated assets, the ICOs and crypto, which are not the same thing, at least from our perspective. We just want to draw that distinction that these are Reg D offerings with the backing offering document. But at the same time, a CUSIP is never meant to be a good housekeeping seal of approval or similar.
So Vince, talk a little bit about that. How will you use the CUSIP standardization at Templum?
Well, as Matt said, as we view at Templum, new market infrastructure. How do we move capital, have capital formation for job creation, economic growth, and new access of differentiating product for investors? It's starting with a CUSIP. Right, so that is the life cycle of tracking these instruments, from trading to issuance to clearance, settlement, and depository. So as we all strive now, as this market is moving, to engage with bigger pools of capital institutionally, you need to have market infrastructure. So when we look at transfer agency, we start to look at self-clearing being developed and the holy grail of custody. All those processes become so much easier and more efficient when you have a CUSIP as the hallmark to be able to track, have audit trails, have comparisons for settlement on the back end, which I think help alleviate mistakes when you look at not just the description, but an alphanumeric identifier that is unique to that security is so important to the space. So again, we were thrilled with CUSIP being such a cornerstone of our traditional market, recognizing that indeed most digital assets are securities, and the ones that we work clearly at Templum Markets are securities. So it is a bit of stepping up with the standard to move forward in what we think is, again, the evolution of finance.
And if I could just add
Sure.
to that, so one of our early observations maybe 2 years ago when blockchain really first started capturing the imagination of the capital markets is, unlike Bitcoin, securities need to interact with environments outside the context of the ledger itself. So there's a lot of post-trade activities that need to take place, whether it's pricing, regulatory reporting, corporate actions. So those are things that, again, don't apply to the Bitcoin world, but how DLT really needed to evolve in order to fulfill its promise with the capital markets, and our hope is that the CUSIP can help it achieve some of those post-trade functions.
So this seems like one more step in kind of the legitimization of digital assets. As we all try to kind of navigate this, and Washington tries to figure it out, and Wall Street tries to figure it out, I mean, and in the bigger picture, is this like one step to get us to where we need to be?
I'll pick on legitimacy for a second. I think when we start and stop with the fact that it's a security, there is a body of an offering document, whether it's the exemption under Reg D, as Matt pointed out, Reg A plus or any other structure, it's a security. So we have benchmarks and understanding what fiduciary responsibility is, what investor rights are. To me, this is a bit more about people recognizing that a security can be held in a digital format. Just as we've spoken about before, it used to be paper certificate, then electronically held as a transfer agent. Okay. So we think smart contract and digitization of securities reflects the next level of ownership of how we're going to record the next 10 or 20 years of ownership of securities.
Okay, anything to add to that, Matt?
Yeah, I would just come back to really bridging the gap between the traditional capital markets and what I think people are more familiar or comfortable with, okay, and then what's going on in the digital space, which it's not going away. I'm not going to say it's the wave of the future, but certainly there's some opportunities there. But to the extent that we can help blockchain as a concept more fulfill its promise in the traditional capital markets, we're eager to play that role.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Matt, for joining us today,
Delighted.
Director
Thanks
of
so much.
Global Services. Thank you as always, Vincent Molinari,
Pleasure, Jane.
CEO of Templum Markets, and thank you as well for joining us on the Digital Assets Report. I'm Jane King of the New York Stock Exchange. Have a great day.